Hello, in this video we continue with iteration number 2 and building the help screen. Now we need to add the instructions. So if we switch to Xcode, in our analysis we figured that a label component will be sufficient for the instructions. So we add a label component and give it a proper size, and in the attributes of the label we can change the number of lines depending on how much instructions you want it to add. If you have too much instructions, you can use a scroll view, which allow the user to scroll within. It's not going to be a label view, but if you look at the object library, there is a scroll view here that you can use. So I'm going to double click and start editing the label. So we'll say that this is click on start game to play. You have 3 turns. You will hear a sound, and you will click on the button that represents the note of that sound. And as you can see, the label is much bigger than the screen, so we make it smaller. I should have probably done that before I start typing. Just wanted to add one more, is that get your score is how many correct answers you will get, or whatever. So this I need to wrap that. I think there might be an option here to keyword wrap. Yeah, I believe there might be something here, and I can't find it at this moment. So I'll have to do that again. Sorry about that. So that's the label with some instructions. The next step is to try the playing with one button. The reason I said one button only is this is our first time to add music files, use the AVAudioPlayer. So you don't want to add all the buttons and try to work with so many things at the same time. Let's take it one step at a time. Before I add the button, we need to add the music files to our app. So you can download that from the learning management system for the class. If you're watching this, otherwise you can download different files that you want. So to add files to the project, you can right click on the project name and say add files to the project. Navigate to where the files are. I have them here under the download, and here they are as a folder. So I'm going to add this as a folder. One thing very important is select copy items if needed as a destination, and then click add. So it added here a group with the folder name and then added all the note files. You can click on the note file and play it, and this will play the note sound, and you can use that to test if the note sound is playing correctly or if it is not playing correctly. So back to the storyboard. we can add one button on the storyboard here. And what I mentioned in the controller, if we can use the same name, you see the file name is named after each note and it has an extension MP3. The file name, if we add it to be the text on each one of the buttons, you can use that to know which file is going to be loaded when the user wants to play that sound file. So let's see how we can accomplish this. We want to recognize the event when the user clicks on that button. So we can bring in the assistant editor, and the assistant editor will display the help view controller, and you click on the button and drag from the button to anywhere in the help view controller. In the connection type, we select action and say we're gonna name this play sound. This is going to create a function that will be notified when the touch up inside event on the button takes place, which is the click button, which is the user click on the button. Here is the argument that I was talking about in the previous video when we analyzed this problem. In the argument, you can choose that to receive no argument, that the operating system doesn't send with the notification any argument, or you can choose to receive the sender. Sender meaning that the object that sent to the event, or in our case, the button that the user clicked on. So we want to receive the sender in this case. We want to know which button the user has selected. And if you're receiving an argument, now you check on the type list, and there are two types. You can use any object, which is stands for a generic type, or you can use the very specific type that you want. In our case, all the types or all the objects that will generate this event come from the UI button type. So we'll choose the UI button type and say connect. So we'll connect, and here it adds the function. It's an interface builder action function, meaning that it is connected to an event. And you can hover over here and you see what connection it has. Then you have the play sound, which is the name of the function, and the argument name and the type. So the argument comes in the definition with two things separated by a colon. The first one is the name, which is the reference to the memory location, which we can use inside the scope of that function, or inside the body of the function, or within the enclosure of that function. So anytime we reference sender, it will mean whatever the operating system has passed to that function. And the type of that is a UI button. So I can use that to retrieve the file name, then use the file name to load an AV Audio Foundation. To use the AVAudioPlayer, we will need to import the AV Foundation. So when you click on the AV type import AV Foundation, it took time, but now it finds it and knows where it is. And then you can come in the help view controller and add an AVAudioPlayer object. So we'll say here var to create the object in memory, and I'm gonna call it player. Use the colon to specify the type, and I'll say AVAudioPlayer. So that's the AVAudioPlayer. And then you can say use an exclamation mark like that to indicate that this is an optional type, meaning it is allowed at this point to have no initial value. You can also specify an initial value by providing equal and then see if there is an initializer in the audio player that's empty, and here is one of those, and that will suffice in this case, that we gave it an initial value. In our case here, I'm just going to use the exclamation mark and say we can use it without, and I will initialize it here in the sound in the play sound function. So inside the play sound function, we'll implement some steps. The first one is to get the file name from the text on the button. And perhaps we don't need the assistant editor anymore, so let's take the full screen. And then the step 2 will be to get the URL to the file location. And step 3, initialize the player with the contents of the file. And then step number 4, play the sound. There is the navigation here, and I don't need it, so I'm going to delete that part so it's not here with me, and move this a little bit to the top. So we have the button sender. So if you go to the sender, which is a UI button, and say, okay, how can I get the text from the button? You can go to the documentation and see if you can use the documentation. And in the documentation, there is the title label. So so you can retrieve the label, or you can retrieve so we'll retrieve the label here, which gives you back a UI label. So we create let label equal. So this gives us the label that has the text as a UI label. So I need another step to use the UI label and say, give me your text. Notice that it added an exclamation, a question mark here, because this title label is an optional type. So I can add the exclamation mark right after the sender equal title label, and that will remove the issue that we have here. So I can say let the file name as a string equal label dot text, and that gives me the label text. Now that I have the file name, I'll move to finding the URL location of the file, and we'll in the first we need to get the bundle as we've done before. The file is included in the bundle, so to get the bundle we use the NS bundle and say I want the main bundle, and that gives us a reference to the bundle, so we need to assign it. So I'll assign it to an app bundle. We use that line multiple times in each of our projects, actually anytime, and we will continue to use it anytime we want to access a resource that exists with the app bundle. So the next step is we need to use that bundle to retrieve the URL for the file that we want. So app bundle, and then look for the method which is URL for resource, and it requires a name of the resource and an extension. The name is a string, and we got it in the file name, and the extension we provide MB3, and that's the extension of the file here. And then we will assign this to a file URL. So let file URL equal the resource bundle. Xcode is complaining here, and I kind of think I know what it is. It has to do with the string. Again, the text gives us back an optional variable, so we need to do the implicit binding, which is using the exclamation mark. Basically tells the iOS framework that we want to bind that optional value with this variable name, and you need to do that before you can use it. So we've done that here. So now we have a file URL, so it is time to initialize the player. So I'll initialize the player using one of the AVAudioPlayer initializer, and here is this one, the content of URL. So the AVAudioPlayer, and it requires a URL, and it has to be optional, so we'll need to come here and add the exclamation mark at the end of the file URL. Then I use the file URL. In the case of error, we can define an error function here I'm just going to say nil, meaning that do nothing. If you try it, what this is saying, if it's trying to go to the file, load the contents of file into memory, into that type AVAudioPlayer, there could be some issues that could happen. So what should I do? You can specify certain steps, or you can say do nothing, which could result in crashing the app. In our case here, we know that the file exists. We know nothing wrong will happen, so it is okay to use a nil. And then we say player.play. The play function will play the sound. It gives us back a boolean if you want to know within your program if the play is correct or not. So now we run the app and test if the play sound will play or not. So move to the help screen. Here is the label, here is the button. Click on the button and it played the sound A. Is that the correct sound? You can come here and look at A and play it. And you can play from here. So it seems like it is the same sound. You can also, if you want to check if you're retrieving the correct file and playing the correct file, you can put a breakpoint. So if I put a breakpoint here and run the app, I can use the, you'll see here the output area. It gives you the values that each member has. So here is the file name, and if I we were at the label, and so the file name has A, and the file URL, here is the content of the file URL, and you can see all of it. So it ends with though that's the app bundle. The file URL is not ready yet, so you have to run the file URL, and here is the file URL, and it's a.mp3. So we can see from here that it captured the correct file, and then it will play that file. So I can just run till the end to see the file being played. And when you're done with that breakpoint, you can drag it to the left and delete it. So we saw here that we were able to play it with one button. So how about adding the rest of the notes? This will mean just adding the rest of the buttons for each of the other notes. So if I switch to the storyboard, and you can copy or you can add new buttons. So I can copy and so Control C and paste and give it the name of the file, and I'm looking here at the names of the files, and then paste another one, and then another one in whatever layout that you would like to put those files at. You can also select more than one of them, copy and paste, and this will be C#, D, D#, and E, and then paste another group. So this will be F, F#, and G, and G#. Now, if you go to the assistant editor, what we want to do is when the user click on each one of the buttons, it needs to notify that function. Since I made a copy and paste, the connection was copied with it as well. And if you do a right click here in the help view, you can see a view of all the connections, and you can see each button is connected to the play sound method. So that's all what is needed. Since the play sound method receives as an argument the actual button that was clicked, if the user clicked the E button reference will be sent to the method. We're going to retrieve the label, retrieve the text. which on the label, which will be the E, use that to load the URL and use it to initialize the player and play the sound. So let's try that for all of them. And so if you click on help, here's the A, here's the A sharp, so these are the different notes, and if you had other sound files, then you will hear all of the different sound files. So the user can come here and practice as much as they want and be ready to start the game, which what we will do in the next video.